Powered by Red Media in partnership with TSN. It is season 5, and this is episode 68, a playoff edition of the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast, presented by our title sponsor, Canadian Club Whiskey. Asking, have you tried the Canadian Club Ginger Ale? Crisp, refreshing alternative to beer. Well-balanced flavors, ginger, subtle notes of rye and spice. It's delicious. And the new formula, 30% less sugar, 20% fewer calories. That is the Canadian Club Ginger Ale. Try it today. There you are, Ray. Yep. For those who follow us on the YouTube channel, the Ray and Dregs YouTube channel, you're in New York, Manhattan, I presume, right? Getting ready for the big tilt tonight, the opener of the Eastern Conference. Is there a buzz? Hard to say in New York City, right? Until you get in the building.
Yeah, you know what? It was weird yesterday. For whatever reason, the city seemed quiet. And
oh boy, we're just saying a lot in New York.
Yeah, it just seemed like I came through the tunnel. I landed in Newark, came through the tunnel, and I was like, wow, it's really quiet. It was weird. And now that the Knicks are out, not that the Rangers need any more focus, but I mean, this is it, right? Like the Yankees and the Mets are doing their thing, and here are the Rangers getting ready for game one, and it'll be awesome in there. And you know what? Like, I think the 4 best teams are probably left, and that doesn't always happen.
No,
and you could make a quibble or an argument on a couple other teams, but like it can't get much better than this. Came across something today, Dregs. Of the 4 teams, the most recent winner is Dallas in 1999. So somebody that hasn't won in 25 years minimum is going to win, and it's pretty cool, I think.
I agree, man. 4 deep teams, which is not always what you expect, but you hope. That's what builds towards where these teams are heading into the conference finals. All right. Dive deeper in headlines, brought to you by Tim Hortons. 2 new sparkling quenchers have hit the summer menu. Mango starfruit with a blend of tropical flavors and wild berry hibiscus with fruity and floral notes for you, Ray. It is a magnificent summertime refreshing beverage, perfect to beat the heat this summer. Okay, we're going to spend a lot of time looking forward here, but we do have to look back to Monday night. Well-executed Game 7, I thought, for the Oilers, until things turned late in that third period. So Ryan McLeod gives the puck away. That turns into a Connor Garland goal and new life for the Vancouver Canucks. In the end, okay, it's not enough to beat the Edmonton Oilers, but first let's close the book on the Vancouver Canucks. I feel like there's a ton of positives to take away from this season. Work to be done to address concerns. Every team that doesn't hoist the Stanley Cup is going to do that. But I thought it was appropriate for the fans in Vancouver to not celebrate the loss and the fact that the Canucks had been eliminated, but to show their appreciation for a job well done to get to Game 7 of the second round.
It has been a decade of misery in Vancouver. It really has. They have had very little to no success. When Jim Rutherford came in with Patrick Allvin, they hired a whole new management team. They brought in Rick Tocchet. They had to change pretty much everything that they were doing because of the previous decade. And they had to untangle some cap mess, and man, it was a lot. And as you know, the Vancouver market, they can be cynical, and they can be pretty hard on their team because they want something to cheer for. They want, and what they were able to do this year, I thought, was remarkable. To the point that by the end of the year, it wasn't whether the Canucks were winning to make people happy. It was they weren't winning the right way. And so they had changed a whole narrative. Now, I think there's a chance the team looks very different next year. You would know as well as anyone, Dregs. They've got all kinds of contract questions, I guess, like a lot of teams do. And you can say this is the benefit of the salary cap. I say it's the worst part of it, that you put together a team and you can't keep it together the way you would like. They're going to have to make decisions, and players are going to have to make decisions, because you can literally play yourself out of the best spot you'll ever be in
Yeah.
and sign somewhere for the most money you'll ever make.
Right.
And that's going to happen across the league. But just to finish on Vancouver, is that they get to game 7 of the second round. They don't have Thatcher Demko, who's one of the best 5 guys in the league. The youngster that went in there, Artur Shilovs, did a terrific job, but he's not Thatcher Demko. And somewhere along the line, that plays a part in it. They don't have their best goal scorer for game 7. Their power play was terrible. Maybe Brock Besser gets one shot.
Maybe.
Just one shot. Not that he's going to change the game on its ear, but one shot, maybe he scores. It didn't feel like Skinner had 35 saves in him. I mean, there were some adventurous moments around there. And the Canucks, right to the end, they had a last chance that hit Zadorov's foot. And I mean, if it gets through, who knows? But the Oilers deserved to win because, they rotate games all the way through, and it gets to game 7, and they play a pretty terrific road game. They really did.
Yeah. So, okay, you be general manager here, which isn't that far removed from your wife, who's the assistant GM of the Vancouver Canucks. What would be your priorities? I mean, Lindholm might be a luxury given what the market is going to command, right? I mean, maybe. Dakota Joshua, go down the list. I mean, if you're renegotiating with that collection of pending unrestricted free agents or free agents in general, where's your priorities?
Well, they built their team on the blue line forward. You've got Hronek and Zadorov and Myers on the back end. No chance you can have all 3 of them back, I don't think. I just don't see how the money works, because at some point, someone's going to offer at least 2 of those 3 something that makes Vancouver uncomfortable. Hronek's a restricted free agent. The other 2 are unrestricted, I believe, correct?
Yeah.
And so you almost have no control of the market. I think they'd like all 3 of them back. I think they'll be able to afford 2 of them. And it doesn't even, it's funny, you could say, what are your priorities? Your priorities are who you can afford.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to blow your salary cap on one defenseman, and then you can't sign any forwards. Joshua is an interesting case. He had a fantastic year, pretty quiet playoff. Certainly in the second round, he had one game where he was really good. Does that all factor in? And could you find a reasonable facsimile of him for less money?
Yeah.
Lindholm's going to be tough, I think, because there's enough teams that lack centers, and Lindholm's a really good player. I think we saw once he got healthy that he was able to really make an impact. They need another top 6 forward. But I'm just, I'm reading through. I was just starting doing my reading today, Dregs, and 4 of the first 5 teams I read said they're looking for a scoring forward. It's not like the supermarket. You go down there and you buy a banana, and if you grabbed a bunch of bananas, I just grabbed the next bunch. It's like, so it's going to be difficult. But priority, I think, is to try and sign a couple of the defensemen. Try and find a top 6 forward that fits in to your mix. And then, you have Pettersson's extension that comes on. Yeah. We can talk about these other parts too, and they're really important. Whatever happens between now and October 1st, Elias Pettersson has to get his game back. Yeah. Because if he doesn't, and I think he will, I think this year just got away from him. It got too heavy on him. The contract weighed too heavy. By the time that got done, it was like the rope was slippery. He couldn't grab it again. And, but it's imperative for the way their salary structure is that Miller centers one line, Pettersson centers another line. It doesn't work if they're on the same line. There's just not enough money to go around.
Yeah. All right, now let's shift and move forward. 4 Oilers top the postseason points list, right? Leon Draisaitl, Connor McDavid, Evan Bouchard, and there's Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, who not so quietly is having a good push here. Zach Hyman, by the way, as you know, leads the playoffs in goals with 11. Draisaitl has 6 power play goals. There is a lot of firepower, yet, at least in some of the radio interviews that I've been doing, people are drawn to the fact that McDavid isn't scoring as willingly as they expect. And I get it. Maybe it becomes an issue against a real good Dallas Stars team, but it's not like he isn't generating. I mean, they're scoring by committee. They're a tough team to win against. And defensively, I think you'd admit, I think it feels like they're better than I expected them to be as a team, if that makes any sense.
Well, I'll start with McDavid. It's shocking to me that they're through the second round and he's got 2 goals. I would have thought that wouldn't be the case. I don't think he was feeling very good in Game 7. He didn't really have a lot of impact on the game at all, which is rare, right? Like it's rare.
Yeah.
Paul Maurice had a quote the other day I thought was really interesting. He said, every series you reinvent your team. You reinvent your game because the new team is going to play differently than the old team. Dallas is nowhere near as physical as Vancouver, but man, they are deep across the board. Everywhere that McDavid goes on the ice, Miro Heiskanen is going to be there, right? Like that's going to be their matchup. And Heiskanen's a fabulous skater, probably one of the few defensemen that can skate in a reasonable way with McDavid. I think he's going to have to score some to get by Dallas. You know what else Zach Hyman leads the playoffs in, I think? Wearing 2 guys' helmets in the same game. I don't know if you noticed at the end of Game 6.
I did, yeah.
His helmet got knocked off, and so they must have looked down the bench and said, who's not getting out here in the last 2 minutes? Ryan McLeod, give him your helmet. And it didn't fit. And it looked so funny on his head because it was lower and it looked goofy as all heck. But I mean, it was because you don't have an extra helmet. No, but you don't travel 2 helmets. You never lose your helmet. And if you do, you just pick it up. But the play went on and he couldn't get it back. I think the other 2 concerns I have with the Oilers are beyond those top 5 guys, they get nothing. And that might be a concern against Dallas. They have got nothing so far. Fogle and McLeod have 1 empty net goal between them. Like that's your third line. Like it just can't be. If that's the case, I think they lose. Like they need something from them. Defensively, I thought a really interesting thing that's happened is Darren has moved out of a sheltered third pair into a pair with Darnell Nurse. And Nurse's game has really been tamped down. He doesn't run around as much. He doesn't get up the ice as much. I thought he had an excellent series. And so the problem with that is Dallas doesn't have one line you want to match with. Right? So you might need to split that pair up a little bit. They've defended really well. They really have. And they're going to have to, because I still don't know what Skinner's all about in this year's playoffs. I mean, he's had 15 shots in Game 6, and I don't know what he had in Game
17, I think
17, 18, something like that. And the goals that beat him was, like a long range slapper, a 25 or 30 foot wrister that he didn't look set on the turnover. Like there would be some concern because at the other end, Jake Ottinger is really good.
Really good.
But the Oilers have fought their way to the conference final. And, to paraphrase Maurice, it doesn't matter anymore how they got there. You reinvent your team for your new opponent. And they're 1 of 4, man. You start the year, if you could say, I'm going to get into the last 4, man, you would buy that every time and say, we'll figure it out once we get there.
Yeah. So the main tipping point, just to put a bow before we go to the Eastern Conference Final, is it either that third line of the Oilers finding a way, or is it more about the matchup that you started talking about in McDavid versus Heiskanen?
I think it's going to be a series of depth. So I think the Oilers need more, certainly more. The McDavid Heiskanen thing is going to be fascinating to watch.
Yeah,
but Dregs, every year you go through the series and it's somebody you don't expect that really gives you a push. Like, could it be Mason Marchment for Dallas? Or could it be, he could get a few goals. Of course he could.
Yeah, why not?
Fogle could score a couple of goals. Like, they're going to need somebody that you might not put at the top. One other point to this, Rope Hintz didn't play games 5 and 6 for Dallas. If he's back, he's a critical piece. And if he's not, that's a big hole in Dallas's lineup. Because somebody's got to play against Leon Draisaitl. And that guy has had, if they're awarding the Conn Smythe today, it's Draisaitl's. He's been,
I'm with you.
He's been fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, even the shot block the other night, right? I mean, that's not unfamiliar territory to Leon, but you could tell it stung him. And then the next time we see him during the intermission, you know, they've got the camera in the room and he's just sitting there. Just let's go.
You can just see in his face when he, you know, I did the game and he was coming back to the bench, and you just like, there's another gear that he finds in the playoffs. There really is, and it's really impressive to watch. Like his focus and his determination, and he buries most of that frustration that he wears in the season. He just kind of buries it away because it's super important. I was really impressed the other night.
Yeah. All right. Well, we look forward to that. That series opens up Thursday. We're recording episode 68 of the Rand Dregs podcast here on Wednesday morning. So it is the East tonight at Madison Square Garden, Florida and the Rangers. For me, this one's almost impossible to break down out of the gate. I mean, does it feel like, hey, let's just drop the puck and see what happens in game one, just expecting it's going to be a fantastic series?
These two teams play so differently. And yet their numbers come out across the board almost identical. What they're strong at, what little weaknesses they have. I'll start with the Rangers. They've shown a resilience this year that I think is different than in the past. They've won 4 games in the playoffs where they've given up the first goal. A couple of times in these playoffs in Carolina, they were way back on their heels, and they found a way to come back and win, including Game 6 when Kreider got the 3 goals in the third period. But you don't just get the 3 goals. You have to stay in the game. They've got one of the best goalies in the game, and he's playing as well as anybody in Shesterkin. Yet you look at Florida, and they've got Bobrovsky, and his numbers are almost the same. And he's rock solid for them. And Florida's a little more physical. The Rangers have a little more dash and flash. They're a little bit different, of course. But I really don't see much difference between the teams. We were just talking about the depth. Two guys because we all know the stars, right? We know Barkov, we know Reinhart, we know Tkachuk, we know Panarin and Zibanejad and Trocheck and Kreider for the forwards. 2 defensemen to watch. One's maybe a little obvious in Adam Fox. He was not healthy in the last series. He didn't have a very good series. He's now had another week off. And if he's healthier, that's a big push for them. And for Florida is Brandon Montour. He can be a game changer. Like he really can. And then up front, 2 guys I really hope Philip Hedl has a good series. He's going to play game 1. Yeah. He's had all kinds of concussion issues this year. He came back, he played 1 game, played really well, and then he was sick the next day, and they just held him out, remember the old phrase, abundance of caution? That was it. They're like, we're not even really sure, other than you're sore and you don't feel great, you're not playing. But he's going to come back in. The Rangers' third line has all kinds of possession, and they never score. Maybe Hedl can change that. And for Florida, I love Anton Lundell. I think he's a terrific player. He just kind of typical Finn player, right? Like kind of like does everything good, not great.
Yeah.
Is in the middle of a lot of things. Had a goal and an assist in Game 6. He's a really important player for them. So those are maybe some of the depth options I'm looking at past the stars in this series.
All right. Well, how often are we going to see either Tkachuk, Bennett, somebody from the Florida Panthers in Shesterkin's goal? I mean, within I was going to say within the rules, but that's
Maybe
not
not.
always the way.
Yeah.
Maybe not with those guys.
I think
but that has to be a tactic.
I think they get through the anthem before they get down there and set up shop. I mean, there's no question that's going to be part of it. Like, and so that's Trouba and Miller, like Schneider.
Yeah,
like you've got to stand firm and box out your crease against two guys in particular that it's like their essence is to get into the blue paint.
Can't wait.
Oh, that will be a battleground. In a way, Dregs, that's got a chance to be a battleground from like the mid 90s.
For sure.
Right. Like when you used to go in there and they, and everybody would turn a blind eye. I think it's going to be a really important part of the way the Rangers defend and the way the Panthers attack.
That would be criteria one for Colin Campbell, hockey operations and supervisors going into this series from the NHL, right? Battle in front of the net, stay out of the blue paint because we are going to scrutinize that area. I mean, it's
but you know
sense,
what? And then
right?
those guys would say, "Who, me? Like, what are you talking to me for? I haven't even started yet. The games haven't even started." And so it's
so good.
It's going to be terrific. And don't think at the other end, like, do you think Chris Kreider is going to get very far from the top of the paint? Not at all. And Bobrovsky's going to have to fight that monster to find the puck. And so I just think this is going to be a terrific series. I really do.
Agreed. Both East and West. So we'll continue to dissect and analyze as the series unfolds. Some news off the ice, and we'll clean things up with the Maple Leafs, where Craig Berube was officially introduced as the head coach of the Maple Leafs on Tuesday. Now, he talked, Ray, about how his team will be hard to play against. That's kind of been the MO of Berube. Fast, north, heavy style, never quit team commitment. Toronto has the talent, right? They do. Mm-hmm. I mean, they have the talent in abundance, but do they have the players to play the game that Craig Berube describes?
I'm going to say no, and because I don't think Craig's approach is really unique. What is unique is the demand for it to be shift after shift after shift, game after game after game. And that's really hard to do. And some guys have it in them and some guys don't. And when he says hard, though, so like what we're really talking about is like playing through the other body, playing through the other guy's hands, not reaching out with your stick to try and poke the puck away. Like if people are thinking it's going to be like a bunch of big mooses running people over, that's
fighting,
not the way,
it's not.
That's not the way the game's played. That's not the way Craig coaches. So I would argue, like, they have talent in abundance, but they don't because they never win.
Yeah, it's fair.
So I don't, that lineup, the lineup doesn't work. And it can work, sure, with a different approach. But at the end of the day, that if you start October with really the same lineup, then you've just got a different guy in a different suit behind the bench. I do think this will be a pretty busy summer, as much as can be worked out, because as we know, your desires to trade and the contracts you hold really are not often the same thing. And so I think it'll be an eye opener for a lot of guys, but I think there's this narrative being built around him that he walks around with a hammer and whacks people on the feet all the time. That's not the way he is. It's not the way anybody is. But there will be a push for a more consistent, heavier style, and that will be a lot different in Toronto.
So Barry Trotz was asked about Mitch Marner and Nashville's interest by a member of the media in Nashville. Trotz made light of the question and then ultimately dismissed as just rumors, which it is. Brad Treliving hasn't started the process of discussing whether or not to approach Marner or John Tavares. As we know, both going into the final year of their contracts, both have the no move clause. But Ray, at some point, I think you have to quietly see what the market is if you're Brad Treliving. He hasn't done that yet. You don't need permission from either player or either agent to talk to other general managers to see what the market might be pie in the sky. So that likely is going to happen at some point. And then, right, you if there's a fit, if you feel like there's a deal to be made with Nashville or anyone for that matter for Mitch Marner, well, you figure out what the deal looks like, and then you go to the player and say, what do you think? There's an opportunity for you to go to Nashville. We could design a sign and trade. You're going to get your money. You're going to get your term. You're going to have the opportunity to win. I mean, that's the scenario that plays out, I would think, because of what you said earlier. Lots of talent, but the talent doesn't win when it matters. So they do have to change the complexion of the core, perhaps.
Yeah, it's funny. It always sounds like it's way in the future, but it's the 22nd of May.
Yeah.
The draft is now. Like the draft is a month. Teams know where they're drafting. Teams have a pretty good idea. Most teams in the next couple of weeks are finalizing, right through the Memorial Cup, finalizing their lists. And those lists are gold to teams because they go, okay, if we draft 23rd or 43rd, who is the players available on our list, which is not the same as your list. So teams are thinking of all these things as they start to look around at possible deals, because there's always picks and futures involved in almost any deal. So when you say he hasn't started, I would say that when the phone went down with Berube, locked and loaded, the other phone got picked up. Like, it's time to go. You don't have time. Like, if they were to trade and get the okay to trade somebody of the caliber and stature of Marner and or Tavares, that doesn't happen on Thursday at the draft.
No.
Like that's a long thing to get going. And so, we saw yesterday for whatever the deal was a couple of picks. I forget the second and seventh.
Nashville and Tampa Bay.
Yeah, so Ryan McDonagh goes back there. By the way, the happiest guy in the state of Florida is John Cooper. John Cooper loves Ryan McDonagh.
I know.
Every time we talk to him, he keeps telling us he should be in the Hall of Fame. I'm like, and he's like, no, I'm serious. Like, he's not even kidding. He loves Ryan McDonagh. So Tampa, what that tells me is Tampa's not ready to turn the page on this group yet.
No, they're not.
They're not. But now all of a sudden, Barry Trotz has got $6.5 million more of cap space to play with.
Yeah. Yeah. And you wonder about Julian Breezeball and the Tampa Bay Lightning and whatever. I mean, there's more maneuvering ahead here because, automatically you wonder about Steven Stamkos and his future as, he's a pending unrestricted free agent. I just feel like there's a commitment to keep the captain. Breezeball has acknowledged that the captain wants to stay, but you got to make the dollars work. So,
okay, but I think this is, I like reading when fans, they're so emotional about it. So they're like, oh, they traded for McDonagh. Now there's no room for Stamkos. Yeah. You realize, I hope everybody does, that in advance of acquiring the $6.7 million of McDonagh, they do have a cap guy that says, if we bring this in and these guys go, that means we have this much for Stamkos. Like, they've got a pretty good idea before the first move's made what the third move is. And the front offices that don't are the ones that get burned. Yeah. Because one definitely plays into the other. And Breezeball is sharp. And when I saw McDonagh, first thing I thought of, McDonagh back to Tampa, I'm like, oh yeah, Stamkos is done.
Yeah.
Like, they're not doing one without the other.
No.
It makes no sense. Well, it makes no sense. So.
All right, those are your headlines. Thank you to Tim Hortons.
Canadian summers just hit different with Tim's. I know it's up. Introducing 2 new sparkling quenchers made with natural flavors and colors. Memories are made with quenchers. It's time for Tim's.
Our interviews on Ray and Riggs brought to us by Canadian Club 1858 Original, the flagship whiskey for Canadian Club. It's where it all began. Aged over 3 years in oak barrels before being bottled, The result, as you know, the smoothest possible flavor, spicy, zesty, with hints of rich oak and sweet vanilla. That is Canadian Club 1858. So we're going to wrap up, but I do have one question. Ask Ray and Dregs anything. By the way, you can send us your questions on X or Instagram at Ray and Dregs, or on the website, rayandregs.com. And it's a coach-related question from Drake. And I think Drake sent it in last week, but we'll get to it now. When will Glenn Gulletson, who's an assistant coach for the Edmonton Oilers, get another opportunity to run a bench? Question. He remembers him in Calgary. Team wasn't very good. So does that mean he's blacklisted going forward? No, he's not. See the success that he's had with the Oilers power play, struggled a bit in Series 2 against Vancouver, but how important special teams are in the bigger picture, of course, that matters. Why hasn't Glenn Gulletson had a chance at another run? And maybe it's timing, Ray. He's going to be an NHL head coach again.
You mentioned the one word that stands out above all of this is timing.
Yeah.
Because if you were a head coach out there right now, like say Glenn Gulletson is going to interview in one of the places looking for a head coach. So now you don't have to compete against Craig Berube.
Yeah.
Right? Because he's in Toronto. But you have Dean Evison, you have Todd McClellan, you have Jay Woodcroft. It's not like there's no other guys that are fighting for these positions. And there's only 32 of them.
Yeah.
And so the other thing that the question states that's really good is that the team in Calgary wasn't very good. So if you're coaching, it takes a lot of convincing to other people that you're a good coach if your record isn't very good.
Right.
And a lot of times the record isn't very good, not because of the coaching, but because of the team. I've said this before. Do you know why coaches walk back and forth on the bench? It's not because they're nervous. They're looking for new players. Except they still get the same 18 guys sitting there each time they go up and down the bench. Like, you can only coach what you got. Glenn is a very good coach. There are lots of really great coaches.
Agreed. Yeah.
And sometimes there's just no jobs when you're available.
Yeah. Yeah, and look at history too, right? Like you mentioned Jay Woodcroft. Hey, I was told that he was impressive in his interview with the New Jersey Devils. It does feel like they're waiting for Sheldon Keefe there to decide. But if Woodcroft lands another head coaching job, maybe if there isn't the same opportunity to stay in Edmonton, maybe Gully joins his old pal Jay Woodcroft for another run as an assistant. Again, you have to let it play out. But your point is well made. There's so many qualified coaches who aren't NHL head coaches.
You just mentioned Edmonton. For years, Chris Knobloch has had an excellent reputation as an up-and-coming coach.
Yeah.
But he had that reputation for a long time. And then eventually an opening came that fit for him.
Yeah.
And the timing of it was the Rangers let him go. Like, wouldn't that be something if the Oilers and the Rangers get into the Stanley Cup final? And Knobloch earlier in the year was coaching their farm team.
Yeah.
But he had to wait, and you just slug along and grind along, and you just hope the opportunity comes. And most guys that are assistant coaches, they'd love to be standing in the middle of the bench. They really would.
Agreed. All right, Drake, thank you. Ask Ray and Dregs anything. Well, you know, we'll get a few more questions into the hopper here in the days ahead.
Well, we should, because Dregs, there's less games. We should. There's less, you know.
Yeah, but we got to get onto the guest wheel, right?
Yeah.
I mean, hey, Jason Strudwick, I don't know if you're paying attention or not, right? He co-hosts the Got Your Back podcast.
Yeah, I know.
Ryan
but he spends a lot of time styling that hair.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, he's a national sensation now. He's a regular on Overdrive with the O-Dog and Noodles and Brian Hayes. So he's got a lot going on. Maybe, I don't know. Do you think he has time to join us to talk about the Oilers at some point?
Well, we might have to.
Too low.
We all have to discuss with his PR guy.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's got his own machine working for him now.
Yeah. And we'll get Coop on as well, right? John Cooper doesn't have much going on.
He's got nothing going
we'll
on
grab
right
him
now.
before
Oh, you know what? He's busy fishing.
Is he?
Oh, he's a big fisherman.
Very good. All right, buddy. I know you got to fly. You got to get to the morning skate.
Do you know what today is? 31st anniversary of the end of Cheers. And if you're
interesting,
if you're a What's going down, Norm? One of those beers. Serve me one.
I love
if you're of a certain age and you know Cheers, oh my God, it was an amazing, amazing show. It was,
but you've been to the Cheers restaurant, the bar, the pub in Boston.
Yeah.
I was so disappointed when I went in there.
Right, because it's not the same. No.
It's not even close. I was like, this is a ripoff. What's going on here? I had a beverage though. I did.
Of course you did.
Of course you did.
But it was a brilliant show back in our day, and it still stands up. If you see it on playing somewhere, just watch 15 minutes of it. You know, it's a sharp show.
All right, stuff. Buddy. Have a good day. Have a good game, and we'll reconvene at some point in the next few days for another episode.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks for listening, everyone.
And thank you to our sponsors who continue to support Ray and Dregs, our title sponsor, Canadian Club Whiskey, and as always, Tim Hortons. Thank you. And thank you for listening, for rating, for sharing the podcast, and for following us on Ray and Dregs YouTube as well. Until next time, enjoy the playoffs and stay safe, everybody.